This old road is what's left of the access road to the Booth family property here in Leith Valley. The Booths were quite prominent in the valley and around town with logging and sawmilling operations. This was also, in the 1880s, the scene of an attempted murder and suicide. So now we're heading to the scene of the crime, as it were. And here, a holly bush, always a good sign that we are on the right track to get to an old farmhouse or a farmhouse site. It's not as good as periwinkle because holly's often spread by birds, but it is a pretty good indicator. Right, I think it's on this curve that the farmhouse site can be found, and I think we'll find it by finding what's left of their rubbish heap, which might involve a little bit of fossicking around in the creek. Often things just get thrown into the creek or thrown down the bank by the creek, and sometimes they get eroded out of the bank, out of the rubbish dump, when the creek floods. And you can pick up your first clues, your first bits of debris in and beside the creek, and you can follow them up often to where the rubbish dump is, pretty much in the way a miner used to pan the gold in a creek, and he'd follow it up to where the gold was eroding out of the stone. And that was the mother lode of the gold in the creek. So we're now in the debris field, or we've arrived and found the debris field of the Booth house. And we've found some brick. Brick gets somewhere because people put it there, and yep, right next to it is some blue and white porcelain. Looks like it could be a teacup handle or something. I'll just put that back. What else have we got? Yep. This, which looks like maybe the rim of a vase or some kind of container. Okay. More porcelain. Looks like it's got a rim on the bottom, so it looks like a piece of a plate or a saucer maybe. I wonder if the people building this know that they're near a farmhouse site. We've got a little piece of dark green glass here, and I'm no expert, but because it's flat and because it's quite thin, my guess is it's from a gin bottle, and my guess is because it's flat, it's from what they called case gin, and case gin came in square bottles because it was imported to New Zealand, and they made them in square bottles to maximise the amount of gin they could get in a case to be put on board a ship. And we've got some glass. We have some glass. Oh, it is a completely intact bottle, and it has writing. Yep, it is the essence of coffee and chicory. So we've got another brick here. It shows all the signs of being made locally, by which I mean pretty much made on site. You would get some clay, you would form your bricks, and you'd put them in a big pile with wood, and then you would burn the wood. I've found brick piles here and there, only one or two. So this would be the site, definitely, of the booth house. Bricks tend not to go very far. In fact, there's another brick up here. And we have more porcelain here too. What do we got? Definitely the place that we have been looking for. And it's here. In the 1870s, Mr. and Mrs. Loft came for a bit of a holiday. Came with a female relative. And Mrs. Loft, it would seem, complained about her husband drinking again. Whereupon, Mr. Loft pulled out a 6-gun revolver and shot his wife. She escaped and survived. Not long after that, when the police arrived on the scene, Mr. Loft, realising that his day was not going to get any better, shot himself with his own pistol. The inquest on the body of Edward Loft was held as customary in the nearest hotel, and that was the Woodhall Hotel, which is still standing. The other woman who was with them, cousin of Mrs. Loft, stated what she saw. Dr. Maunsell, who investigated Mrs. Loft's wounds, was able to say that he found a penetrating wound through the base of her neck and coming out of her scapula, her shoulder bone. Also found on her chest a black mark like a bruise, and this was believed to be a bruise from the bouncing of one of the 2 bullets that Edward Loft shot at his wife off the steel of her corset stays. Mrs. Loft, for those days, had suffered a serious wound, especially if infection set in. But, as Mark Twain might have said, reports of her demise were greatly exaggerated. And after recovery, she placed an ad in the Otago Daily Times in 1887. Mrs. E. Loft is now progressing favourably towards recovery, and in consequence, the premises 9, 10, 11 and 12 of the Royal Arcade will be reopened and business resumed on Saturday, October 15th. And this is Dunedin's Broadway. Just approaching the rush hour, it's a little bit busy. But back in the day, until 1931, it was the Royal Arcade. And this is where Mrs. Loft traded in boots, shoes, slippers, all kinds of footwear until her death at the age of 70 in 1912. She was buried alongside the remains of her husband Edward in Dunedin's Northern Cemetery.